Thank you for your teaching. Thank you.
Welcome. Have we spoken before, Suresh?
No, we have not. We have not. Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Where are you based?
I'm in Florida, actually, in the US, in Florida. So
wonderful. Welcome.
Yeah. Wonderful teachings. I've been looking for somebody that expresses Ramana's teaching. So it's great to have stumbled into you. I have more of a practical question. Do you experience any mental contractions? Maybe not identification with the mind, but just as, say, if I bump my arm against something, there'll be a compression in the arm for a short time, and then it gets restored to normalcy. Is the dissolution of mind, does that mean no more mental contractions, or is it non-identification with those contractions?
That's a great question. It's actually very difficult to explain. Now, I could give you some answers, right?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't quite be right. So I will give you some answers, but it's not quite right, okay? So the question basically is, do you experience mental contractions? Okay, and you gave an example of a physical effect, like a physical contraction you could have.
Right.
So another question you could ask, which is the same question actually, is, do you experience, you're asking a jnani, a sage, aren't you? That's the implication of the question.
Right.
You're asking a sage, an enlightened being, let's say. And there is no such thing as an enlightened being, as I've mentioned before, but because there is the enlightenment, liberation is not for the body mind. But you could ask the sage, do you ever stub your toe? Yeah. Do you ever stub your toe? Do you ever get an itch on your shoulder?
Yeah.
Do you ever, can you get a cough? Or is it that you never get a cough? Yeah. You'll never get an itchy scalp, you know? Or is it that you are not attached to the itchy scalp? Yeah. Then the reason I'm phrasing it I'm talking about the body now, aren't I?
Right.
Is it that you'll never get a paper cut? Or is it that you're not attached to getting a paper cut? Yeah. The reason I'm making it about the body is because the mind and the body is the same. Another question you could ask, if you met an enlightened being, you could say, does it ever rain where you are? Yeah. Is it always sunny? Or is it sometimes rainy, but you're not attached to the rain? I know these seem like different questions, but you asked a question, Suresh, pertaining to the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've then expanded that out to the body. And then I've expanded it out to the world or the environment. Do you see what I've done?
Yeah.
It's the same basic question, those three different levels: body, mind, world. These three, body, mind, and world, are the same. It's all a dream. It's Maya.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing I see, though, the quality of mental expressions of people who are abiding in the self seems to be different. They're always equanimous. They might catch a cold, but doesn't seem to be any aberration in their mental expression. They always seem to be even-keeled, compassionate, concerned for others, not anxious. All the no no sense of possession or greed. There's always a broad outlook, and I've met some people like that, and you seem to also have that kind of mental disposition. Whereas at the physical level, I might see them get a cold,
Yes.
but I don't see mental expressions that are equivalent. So it makes me almost think that they're always peaceful.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. There are changes on the body mind level.
Yeah.
There are also changes on the world level as well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With liberation, there are changes on the level of the body, the mind, and the world. But in truth, you see, the jnani has no body and has no mind, you see. So with the answers given are on the level of the body mind.
Yeah.
And contractions can always happen. With a liberated sage, liberated being, it will happen much less because there's no ego. There's no psychological center, right? But there can still be disturbances in the mind because that's the nature of the mind. There can still be disturbances of the body because that's the nature of the body. And there can still be disturbances of the weather and the world because that's the nature of the world. But for the sage, there is no body, no mind, no world. So for Tom, the body mind, Tom does experience contractions. Much, much less than a regular person, probably. And much, much less than Tom used to. Hardly ever at all. But it happens, just leave with my family for some time. Yeah. And they'll find a way, right? To be honest, actually, I'm joking about that because actually, for me, that very rarely happens even with family. But it's actually irrelevant. What happens is that whether a contraction appears or not is irrelevant. Okay. Now, when I say that, it sounds like that, you suggested me an answer. You suggested an answer that is it that contractions happen, but you're not attached to them? So I could say, yes, that's what it's like. Contractions happen. There's no attachment to them. But that's actually not what it's like. My personal experience is there is no contraction ever. The body is a contraction. The body existing is a contraction. The mind existing is a contraction. The world existing as these separate things. This is a contraction. There is no perception of any of that kind of thing. This is what cannot be explained. That is what you are now, Suresh. That is what you are now. You are not Suresh, and I am not Tom. So the question is asked because it's assumed that the liberated being is a body mind, and he or she is not. And nor are you. And this is the very radical aspect of the teaching that must be discovered for oneself in one's own experience, in quotes, in order to understand, in quotes, this. You see, this has to be discovered, right? Now, when you come across teachings, any of us here, when any seekers, anyone here comes across a teaching, right? You'll find many teachings describe the body, mind, and world. They'll have some theory to describe the body, mind, world, right? They'll say there's a body, there's a mind, there's a world, for example, like I do. Or they might tell you about energy centers in the body, like chakras or something. Or they might tell you about psychology of some kind. Or they have some kind of schematic, some kind of way of describing psychology or the body or the mind or the world or ignorance. Yeah, they'll have some kind of theory about what ignorance is, how it comes about, this kind of stuff, right? On one hand. The other thing it will have a theory about, a conceptual idea about often, is what liberation looks like. Yeah. They'll tell you in liberation, this is what liberation looks like. It looks like this, it looks like that. And Suresh's question is about this latter one. It's like, liberation, what does it look like with respect to mental contraction, was his specific question. But it's essentially a question about what is liberation, right? So we've got these two pools here. One, a teaching tells you about the nature of ignorance, or the nature of the human being or the human condition or something like this. And the other one is a teaching tells you about the nature of liberation. Now, all teachings do this to a greater or lesser extent. Bhagavan did the same. But Bhagavan's emphasis isn't on these two things. His emphasis isn't to describe ignorance to you. And his emphasis isn't really to describe liberation to you either. He shies away from these things as much as possible. He does go into these things when he's drawn into it by the seeker. The seeker demands questions. So then a response comes on that level, right? What is Bhagavan's emphasis? His emphasis is on silence. Why is his emphasis on silence? Silence is the ferry, the vehicle, the mode of transportation that takes you from ignorance to liberation. He doesn't want to spend too long describing the starting point, ignorance. And he doesn't want to spend too long describing the travel destination, liberation. Yeah. He wants to pack your bags and push you onto the ferry as quickly as possible, because he knows that ignorance is not real. No point describing it too much. Yeah. Just enough to convince you to get away from it. And he knows liberation, which is the reality, cannot be described, can never be explained. Do you understand? So he'll give you some hints about, what's liberation? Oh, it's Sat Chit Ananda, it's silence. It's this, it's that. The body does this, the body does that. You see? Bhagavan actually said there's no karma in liberation, no karma at all. The body is karma. Did you know that? The body is cause and effect, action.
Yeah.
There's no karma in liberation. All the karmas are abolished in liberation. Because the body is a karma. The mind is a karma. These are doings. This is cause and effect. Maya is karma. Karma is Maya. Maya is karma. So Bhagavan doesn't spend too long describing liberation. He is practical. He'll tell you much about liberation as you need to know, but he's trying to pack your bags and get you onto the vehicle, self-inquiry, silence. That takes you home. Because it's fine to ask questions. It's natural to ask questions. Well, where am I going? Yeah. How do I get there? Natural to ask these questions. But after you've asked these questions enough times, you'll realize, you know what? Tom says this is what liberation's like. Someone else says that's what liberation's like. Another person says that something else. I don't know which of these is true. I need to find out for myself. Yeah. And to do that, you have to get onto the ferry. Be still. You discover this very quick. The ferry is very efficient. The problem is what? We like to, and I'm not talking about you, Suresh, or anyone in particular. I'm just saying generally, the mind will like to talk about the beginning of the journey, ignorance. It will talk about the body. It will talk about the mind. It will talk about the world. It will talk about the connection between the body and mind. It will talk about the connection between the body and the world. It will talk about the connection between all these different energies and blah, 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 which is fine. And then it will talk about liberation, the nature of liberation. Let's argue about the nature of liberation. But Bhagavan wasn't too interested in this stuff. Like the Buddha. Buddha wasn't too interested in saying all this stuff. He just, the emphasis was on the path, the vehicle. What you'll find is after you've asked all your questions, you'll be left right where you started, but with something. You would have gained something from those questions. What you will have gained is this. You will have realized that these questions lead you nowhere. And the only way you can go somewhere, so to speak, is through not going towards objects which are temporary and transient, but going to that which is eternal, which is the I am. So this is a great thing to gain through asking questions, through Shravana. Shravana is hearing the teachings, through Manana, which is asking questions and contemplating on the teachings. These are very important things to do. Asking questions is very important. Hearing the teachings is very important. At the end of it, you'll realize, oh, none of this stuff is going to help me. I need to be still, go back to myself. So it's very fruitful to discover this for oneself, to discover the futility of anything apart from self-inquiry or being still or turning towards the self. So Suresh, I drifted I rather drifted from your question than the answer, but I hope
No, it was very, very, very helpful because you're pointing to nididhyasana.
Yes.
But the Shravana is part of that process to get to the stillness. Yeah.
That's it. Nididhyasana, for people who don't know, is being still, abiding as the self.
Yeah.
Meditation. And the Shravana Manana leads to nididhyasana, of course. Yes. Thank you, Suresh. Is that okay? Unless you want to say anything else.
No, that's perfect.
Great. And lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.